Hi, everyone. Welcome to our guest panel. Today it's projection and lighting design. And we want to remind everyone that we do record these sessions. So if you're with us on the Zoom, you don't want your face seen, then just, keep your video off. And I'd like to let you know that we also hope that you'll feed in your questions to our I guess Mackenzie's taking questions today into the chat room, so please do. And I'm going to introduce you to Mackenzie Murphy, who's going to take it away and start our panel for today. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, and here I am. So hi, everybody. Thanks again for coming. Today, as Jane mentioned, is our Saturday session for projection and lighting design. It is actually extra special because not only for our guests that we have, but our co-host Emily, who is one of our amazing mentees from Montclair State University, has graciously offered to help. So with that, she's going to get into our land acknowledgement that we do for every one of these, and then we'll get into the main part of the panel. So let me pull it up for you guys right now, which would be helpful. And Emily, feel free to take it away whenever you want.
Awesome. For our land acknowledgement. We wish to pay respect to the many Indigenous peoples of New York whose ancestors have been here since time out of mind. We pay respect to their ancestors, past, present, and future, starting with the Lenape people, including but not limited to the Merrick, Canarsie, Rockaway, Matinecock, Munsee, Lenape, and Six Nations, and acknowledge that this city and nation were founded upon exclusions and erasures of many Indigenous peoples' cultures and stories. In addition, the foundation of this city and many of its original buildings were built and funded by the sale of enslaved people of African descent.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Emily. Okay, so to get back on track here. Okay, so our panelists for today is Elaine J. McCarthy, who's a projection and set designer, Matt Frey, lighting designer, and lastly, Masha Tsimring, who is also a lighting designer. And as mentioned, our fabulous mentee, Emily. So to start, I would love to just kind of go through what exactly projection and lighting design is with everybody. If Elaine, if you would like to start that, we'd love to hear your thoughts.
Sure. Projection design, these days, it's kind of transitioning from, I think it originated with a traditional term like projection design. And these days it's like digital media, video, videography. It kind of encapsulates all of it having to do with visual imagery on stage. I always think of it as somewhere between lighting and scenery, kind of the mortar between those two bricks. That sometimes we're front and center helping to be another character on stage, and sometimes we're special effects, and sometimes we blend with lighting, sometimes we augment the scenery. So we're kind of again, I think the best thing I've always said is mortar between the bricks of lighting and scenery.
Wow, I love that saying. Thank you. Okay, Matt or Masha, whoever wants to take hold next. Oh, Matt. There you go. Nice.
Yeah, I think that in terms of lighting and with respect to working with projection, that lighting is always and always has been about composition. It's kind of essentially guiding our eye and figuring out where we're supposed to be. And I feel like now it's sort of often having a partner in terms of doing that with projection. So it's a constant checking of composition and where we're supposed to be looking. And on top of that, I think so much is also about creating the rhythm, the way things move and flow and change and timing and all that stuff. So composition and rhythm, I think, they have going on together.
Fantastic. Okay, Masha?
Yeah, I think I would agree with all of that. And then there's also something about lighting wherein it's so abstract that there's an emotional landscape that's possible with lighting that everybody feels because we all move through the world in some lighting state or another. Yeah, and so it can just like live in a less concrete space and sometimes communicate emotions and feelings and certainly movement and time in a way that other things that are a little bit more literal or a little bit more concrete cannot.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and with that, Emily, do you want to start us off with our first round of questions as we go along this panel?
Absolutely. All right. So the first question is, what was your journey like towards becoming a designer? Did you have a mentor, and or like did you have anybody specifically that helped you on your way up? I don't know who's going to start with this.
If we want to start the same order as before, if you guys want to do that, start with Elaine and
Sure,
Sure.
that's fine. I do have a mentor. I didn't find my mentor until I was 28 years old. So I spent the first 28 years of my life kind of exploring and learning and getting tools in my tool chest and experience just in the world. But when I was 28 and a student at NYU, I met Wendell Harrington and spent the subsequent 3 years working in her studio. I think of it as grad school, even though I was working on my undergrad. Meeting Wendell kind of brought together all my interests because my background had been in photography, architecture, old books, just like from all over the map. And it never seemed to make any sense why I was interested in so many diverse things. And then meeting Wendell was like, oh, I can actually bring this all under one roof. So I was very fortunate that I was really looking for a needle in a haystack, and I actually found it. So that was Wendell Harrington.
that's incredible.
I think I started in high school, and I somewhat by accident. I was always drawn to theater, but not interested in actually doing the part on stage. And my friend Robert and I were the only ones in my high school who knew how the lighting system actually worked. It was a very antiquated thing. And so we just did that. And I think it was handed down to us by a couple of older high school kids. I'm sure there was some other extracurricular activities that got us really interested in doing this stuff. But I usually tell people that I think they would pay, then they hired us to like do outside events that would come in, and they paid us at the time, I think the minimum wage was $2.35 an hour. So my joke is I still make about $2.35 an hour. So I then moved to New York because I wanted to do theater. I did it in the summers. I fell into lighting because I don't know why, but it was the thing that appealed to me the most at the time, and it still does. I don't think I really had a mentor from when I got to college. I lived in New York for 5 years. I don't think I really had a real mentor until I went to grad school. And in that case, it would be a couple of people, among them Jennifer Tipton and Steve Strawbridge. And so, and then left that and then kept going rung by rung.
Here you are, a very happy accident.
I feel like Matt and I had the same journey. Not quite, but I also got into lighting in high school. Also, there was like the one senior guy that knew how the lighting system worked, and I ended up in stagecraft class because that was it was after school, and like none of the other drama classes fit into my overly ambitious during the day schedule. And so then he was like, I'm graduating, someone needs to learn. So I did that, and then I kept doing it. And then my parents thought that lighting was not a viable career choice, which, you know, so I started college as a poetry major, which is also not a viable career choice, but I sneakily went to a college that also had a very good design program at Emerson College in Boston. So I speedily switched myself back into the design program there, and did that while continuing on my literary path as well. And then I moved to the Bay Area after college and did an internship at Berkeley Rep, which was great. It didn't charge me anything. They housed me, they paid me. That was nice. and met some folks there that kind of, I feel like early days did some mentoring. Ironically, they were both graduates of Yale, so it sort of funneled into my grad school self. So that was like Scott Zielinski and New York Kennedy, who were classmates, I believe, which is funny. And then I went to grad school where I adopted all of Matt's mentors, of Jennifer Tifton and Stephen Stravridge. And then I moved to New York for the most part ever since then, and have been working and traveling around, doing lots of different things.
Very great. And now you're here. And I mean, nothing against poetry, but very glad that you made the switch. Okay, so next question. What skills do you guys suggest for students to learn or focus on, or what would you wish that you told your younger self when you entered the business? Maybe, after school and now you kind of obviously are at that point. What would you tell yourself?
I think the biggest thing is to not doubt yourself and not fall for the usual trope we have here in the US that you're supposed to know what you want to do. I mean, from a very young age, we're asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? And why would you ever ask a toddler? I mean, what pressure to put on a young person, and not instead say, great, what are you interested in? Oh, wonderful, you should check this out. I think that I would tell myself to stop listening to other people and instead follow my heart, because it turned out I was stubborn and I followed my heart, but I felt like crap the whole way along because all these people kept speaking in my ears and telling me, what I was doing was wrong. I needed to pick one thing. And it turns out the one thing I was looking for, like 5 people were doing. So I think that, as long as you have a roof over your head and food on the table, and, you cut the ties with your parents and plunge out into the world on your own, whose business is it what path you take and how long it takes you to find something you're passionate about. So I really wish that had been more of the environment on my journey. Would have eliminated a lot of anxiety during those early years. And as far as tools are concerned, in my mind, the tools change so quickly, projectors, media servers. I'm a big fan of putting a priority on exposing yourself to just your visual mind. So being out and being present, putting your phone down, looking at a distant horizon, taking in the color of a sky, the emotion of a conversation happening next to you on the train, not being afraid of libraries, step away from digital devices where you can do searches where you're going to get the same 5 things anyone else is doing the same search, is that there's a big, broad world out there. And that's where the interesting stuff lies. And be rigorous. Don't be a lazy designer. It's really easy to be a lazy designer. A rigorous designer is like a good detective. They're looking for the absolute answer. They're not looking for the neighborhood of the answer. They're looking for, how do I solve this design puzzle? So you can keep your tools and they just go in the toolbox, and then 5 years from now, 3 years from now, 2 years from now, that won't be the digital media server. That won't be the software of choice. Truth be told, of course, you should know Photoshop. You should know for projections. You should know After Effects. Great to have a baseline knowledge of one of the playback systems like Isadora or Watch Out, but that's really going to be about being exposed to them and the nuts and bolts of them. You really can't decide, this is my tool and this is the tool I'm going to use, because there's one thing I can guarantee you: the tools will change. But feeding your brain, feeding your creative mind, that is the one thing that's truly your own. And that also helps with competition, because when you're feeling competitive and you're feeling like, why did they get that gig and not me? It's nice to be able to say, well, they didn't want Elaine McCarthy. They wanted, John Doe, because you are that one thing you have that no one else has is is yourself, and yourself as the designer, you are the artist, you are. So the best exercise you can do is to constantly be feeding and growing as a designer.
Yeah. I think the things that I think people are important to concentrate on is understanding the life of a designer on its entirety and its whole. Understand what that means, not just when you're in the theater, but when you're not. And you know, the things that are going to be required of you and where you need to be, and the expenses that you'll run up against, and the challenges and all of that stuff that, you know, happen outside of the theater. Understand what the life really is. Understand that the life has doesn't really adhere to a clock very much, that your things happen when they happen, and you got to understand that in a way. So it's a really important, I think, to understand the sort of entirety of a designer's life. And I think just when you get out, go, do, watch, see what people do, and you can start to develop that. In terms of what I would tell myself, I think I probably would have told myself that it's going to be very extremely, Matthew, it's going to be very extremely important for you to do a lot of self-promotion and get out there and push, and, you know, get a website going, all these things. And I mean, that's even truer now, and I think it's even easier now. But I think that's a really important thing. Like, stick to your convictions, believe in yourself, and really put yourself in those places, even if they're awkward. I think that's really important. I'm not entirely sure I would have listened to myself if I had told myself that anyways, but I'm going to tell you guys that, and I think it's an important thing to keep.
Well, they'll hear it more because you're not their parent, Matt.
Yeah, that's true. They'll listen.
Very good.
Definitely. Yeah, libraries, 100%. Definitely tools wise, yeah, just being a sponge, because you never know, like when you go to a random gallery on the street or watch a music video or whatever, like you never know when your little brain is going to pull it out in some meeting. And also knowing that everyone that you're going to work with is referencing things around you, and it does help to know what they're talking about. And if you don't know, you know, go look it up. I think advice, I guess I would give my younger self, and it's also, I think, maybe a tool, is don't stay in your lane, which is a hard, collaboration is really hard, and takes practice and work and care and grace and all of that. And I think a lot of times, especially I think when I was younger and still now sometimes, like people show up to a production being like, well, I'm the projection designer and I'm the lighting designer and I'm the set designer. And like, I will worry about my little fiefdom and that will be that. But of course, the best processes usually come when we're all blended together. And, you know, there's a lot of defense mechanisms that come into play because we're all like artists filled with jelly. But being able to both listen, because the set designer very well could have a great idea about where a light can live in their set because they've probably thought about it. And similarly, you too have great ideas about other disciplines because you're all making a world together. It's not one and then the other and then the other. And I think that goes to directing as well. I think designers have to think like directors all the time, and not be afraid to talk about staging, to like really get in there with directors about how and why things are happening rather than just speaking the language of your own discipline. Not that you need to steamroll people, because absolutely not, but just getting comfortable being like, actually, you know, I have this great idea, and if they stood 3 feet that way, like maybe we will all get to what we're going for, instead of being just fuming inside, being like, God, why didn't they stage them 3 feet that way? They're not going to know unless you tell them. So being a little more transparent and honest and collaborative generally.
Great points.
Love all of those answers. Also, the exciting part about being part co-host, but also being a senior in college is I'm also absorbing all of this information and taking notes. So that's a fun part. So I resonated with a lot of those things, and I love how like you're also like saying a lot of the things that my professors are saying. So like, you know, it's the whole echoing of that's I should listen to all of this advice essentially as I go out into the real world, because that's important for me. But I yes, the whole self-promotion, that's gonna be hard and scary. But I guess I'll just continue to be a sponge and do all the things, because that's what I have to do, right? How to be an adult 101. Yeah. All right. Next question is, what kinds of works within the entertainment industry do you gravitate towards? That can be in any direction, shape, or form that you would like it to be.
What works? I think that I come from a weird place right now just because I'm a voter for the Lucille Lortel Awards. So right before the pandemic, I saw 100, everything off Broadway except for the like 6 shows I was signed up to see when the pandemic hit and everything fell off a cliff. And now I'm continuing, so I've seen everything since fall through now. So for me right now, my prior to the pandemic, I was just so exhilarated because I was back seeing everything off Broadway. And essentially when I was young, a lot younger and working off Broadway, I did also work off Broadway recently, but I was just thinking about what the stories were being told, 30 years ago and 25 years ago. And I was so excited, 2 years ago, the fact that the most traditional play I was seeing off Broadway was a gay couple and their daughter, and it wasn't about them being gay. It was just this was the, pardon the expression, but it was the most straight play out there. But every other story I was seeing out there was diverse and interesting and challenging, and I was so excited by what I was seeing off Broadway. Because it had changed so much, and off Broadway is kind of you're looking towards the future of what's Broadway, but more importantly, what's going to be presented in those small high school theaters in the Midwest, or places that wouldn't necessarily be exposed to these stories. Was exciting to me. So right now, off Broadway, and right now it's been bittersweet because in the fall, sitting in a theater, the audiences, were half full. Only in recent weeks have audiences started, been sold out when I go to see shows. So that's been an interesting journey. But for me, aside from reading and, watching my favorite TV shows and the occasional movie, I'm really excited by off-Broadway. I just think I think as much as it's in danger, just because there's no sustaining that economy is really hard if we're still going to take care of people working within that realm. It's still where you see the future of theatrical storytelling. So that's what feeds me right now as a designer.
Yeah, I think I would say that mostly I'm most attracted to new work, and I was going to answer this more as in terms of what appeals to me, in terms of what I want to work on. I love something that hasn't happened before. I love something that doesn't have any rules. I love that there wasn't previous conceptions of it and everybody got hung up on something that was done or happened. I love being a part of the playwright, composer, whoever it is, helping them discover what they think it should be together. I love being on that journey. I love when someone doesn't know the answer. We don't have to know, and we can just go on. So I'm always attracted to new stuff, whether that's new plays, new music theater pieces, opera, so forth. So I think that's my favorite thing. I think I'm also attracted to new theater when I go see it. it for some reason excites me, and I get a little thrill out of seeing something that hasn't happened before. I also feel that sometimes classic theater becomes a word that makes a reason why we should do it because it's a classic. And I feel like classic is sort of a word that's kind of code for, you know, white straight male theater that happened for the last hundreds of years. I just think that, you know, there should be a big reset, and I'd love to see what the other stuff is that's out there. I always think about, somebody asked Justice Ginsburg, like, okay, on the Supreme Court, how many of the judges do you think should be women? And she said 9. Because why should there be a number? Also, there have been hundreds already. So I think we should just do 9 for the next 200 years or whatever. But it's sort of, I just think it's you know, going to see these things are going to make these things happen more. So I think it's an important time, especially now, to try and go see that work as opposed to things that you maybe should see. I'm not slamming all classic theater. Sure, there's reasons, but it has to be more than just that it's a classic.
Yeah, for sure. I like things that play with form, I think. So they're usually not defined as like, I am a play, I am an opera, or even if they are, they're somehow pushing against the boundaries of that. And I find that true with also like films I like to watch, books I like to read, things like that. Like most of our work has these preconceived notions and conventions because it's existed for so long. And then like taking that apart to its pieces and putting it back together in different ways is really exciting to me. I like things with music. And I found that post pandemic coming back, I don't know what we're calling this time. Even though generally, again, I'm a pretty language-based person, I've had a harder time with plays, even new exciting plays. And I think because I've stopped believing things as much. Everything sounds falser to me than it did before. So either things that are really drastically playing with form and authenticity and kind of what it means to try and present naturalism on stage, or things that live more in a musical or abstract realm that are just living with me and my emotions and not trying to put things into language at all, which is just a funny, weird thing that I'm going through. But yeah, epic things are also fun, just things that are really big.
Epic. So much content and so much stuff to absorb, as we mentioned before. So the next question is, how do you overcome the no's in the industry? You know, maybe not just creative no's, but also we talked about self-promotion, and maybe when you have an opportunity fall through that you were really excited about, what are some really good tools and how to face that and overcome it?
I don't know that I should go first all the time.
We can change it up if you
Feel
want.
free to switch.
You want to take it, Matt?
Sure, I'll go.
Okay.
There are so many different kinds of no's that happen, and each one we can have a different discussion about all of them. But you know, we can look at no's as the things that people tell you can't do or can't have or so forth. I think it's really important to, before you get to the no, be in a position where you really, you know why you need X or why you want to do X. Really feel like you've done your homework on it. And then, I mean, this is where we don't do a lot of business training, but then you should add a little bit more, because it's all about getting to that place that's going to make you be able to do your work. So there's no formula, but you know, be sure about what you want and then just add a little more. The other form of no, sometimes I kind of enjoy those. I think I'm there aren't too many lighting designers who, when they see a ceiling, don't really mind, because all of a sudden I have a whole bunch of guardrails set up, like, oh, that's not an option. So the puzzle becomes about all the other things and all the other ways. And I think there's always a way in. You've just got to find it. So sometimes the no's, you can't do this, you can't do that, are great ways to discover something you wouldn't have, because you would have fallen into something that was, you know, a usual suspect, or something you would have just done out of habit. And so I think sometimes the no's force you to really use your brain in a way that you maybe weren't going to. And so I think for all the bad no's, I think there's some really great no's. So try and find those.
Matt, you made me think of something that another mentor type human said once. This theater maker named Jim Finley came
Oh yeah, Jim.
I like this, he doesn't remember saying this, but he came to speak while I was in grad school, and then we started working together years and years later. And he does all sorts of design, and now he's a production manager and he makes his own stuff. Anyway, very sort of creative thinker. And he came, and I guess he was talking about set design. And he said that he thought of set design as a series of obstacles to place for the actors. And I was like, yes, absolutely. Because obstacles are great. Similarly, as someone that's going to be walking into a very small, very ceilinged set in a week, I love a ceiling. I mean, because it's there. Nobody doesn't think it's there, right? The obstacles aren't invisible, they're there. And like the interesting thing is seeing how you deal with them, which I think is fun in theater and is also, you know, sometimes less fun in life, but in the end, it's usually useful. I think you can also say no. Saying no is great. And there's, I mean, especially always in this very unstable career, there's fear about not getting a job or not doing something right or not doing the thing, but also pretty much any time in my experience that, you know, like I really wanted this thing and some other wonderful lighting designer is doing that thing instead, like something else great comes into that window, whether it's another project that's like weird and experimental and actually more what I would like to do. And of course they program last minute because they're weird and experimental and they wouldn't have asked me 6 months ago, like the nice regional theater that pays a lot more did. But I would much rather do that work. Or, I mean, if you like in the self-care mindset, you're like, okay, you didn't get that job, take a trip somewhere you want to go, like do something else with your mind. Whether it's like just out of town or wherever is affordable or to visit your family, whatever. But that way you're not sitting at home stewing about it and like second guessing yourself. You're actually doing something you won't have time to do later because another job will inevitably come around. So kind of taking, like reframing it as more control, I think is useful.
I think the word listening to you two is scrappy. It's kind of like you have to be scrappy. As far as no, taking no for an answer, one of my favorite things to do is if what I want to do is not, the director's not willing to hear it and they're so hyper focused on what's in their mind's eye, do what they ask for, but at the same time build what you're talking about, because that's, I think, when show me comes into play. So sometimes it's best not to take no for an answer, but definitely don't then go in there and show them what you want to show them. Go in there and show the director what they asked for, and then show them a different take. You do it respectfully. You do it. You're considerate of their needs and their vision, but at the same time, don't just give up. That's where the scrappiness comes in. And as far as, I mean, heck, I've been a woman working in a male-dominated business my whole life. If I took no for an answer, I would be doing something very different. I guess I always feel as though there are two of my mantras. One of them is sort of more of an action, and that's kind of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps when, you know, when the window closes, the door opens, that kind of thing. Is just sort of making your own. Don't turn it into something that makes you defeated. Instead, it's like, okay, what's next? Like that, those are the words that have saved my sanity so many times through the years. I mean, for the pandemic, what can I do at this time? How can I use this time? What's next? Constantly being hungry for, and it doesn't necessarily, I mean, honestly, it could be working at Starbucks and getting health insurance, and that gives you time to work on a design project you've wanted to work on, or an art piece. It's like, don't exclude anything, because you can learn from all sorts of experiences. So I just think a broader life is a better life. So take things as opportunities. And as far as the self-promotion, pardon me, my husband and I were just talking about this the other day, because I think growing up as a woman, Boston Irish Catholic, through a certain generation, self-promotion, it was not a thing. You did not do that. It was like a venal sin. It was not ladylike. It just was, you know, gauche. So I barely took pictures of my work, and I really regret it. And it truly was this idea of like, oh, don't look at me, don't, which is complete and absolute generational bullshit. Because if you don't own your work, how's anybody else going to see it? And I also, you know, everything in moderation, except moderation, and that is that don't hyper focus on posting every day and being on Instagram and in my opinion, then you run the risk of spending too much attention self-promoting and not enough attention having the chops. So there's a nice balance between owning your work and letting people know you're working, and then also doing the work. Because being a self-promoter, at a certain point, you know, the emperor has no clothes. You get found out. But a nice balance is appropriate and feminine and not gauche. And, you know, that's complete bullshit, because no one else is going to do it for you unless you hire a marketing person. And we're already not making enough money in the first place. Like, we can afford a marketing person. So that's my 2 cents.
Love listening to all of that. I don't know. I'm just going to keep saying that every time another question pops up, and all of you answer, because I thoroughly understand it's great to see everyone's perspective on these questions. So actually, coming from someone who is currently trying to receive a BFA in lighting design, I've gotten mixed answers about this, of like, did you go to get a master's degree? And would you recommend it to someone who is currently studying and to get a BFA, or like in general, do you recommend getting one? And then what are the advantages of getting an MFA in projections and or lighting?
Am I still first? Yeah, so I'll
Do it.
go. I went to undergrad, just a regular BA, SUNY Stony Brook for half of my college, and the University of Michigan for the second half. Graduated, lived in New York for 5 years to do theater. I was always going to live in New York once I got out of college, because, but theater ended up being the thing I found myself doing by the end of college. And I used those 5 years to sort of see and do whatever I could. I got to the end of those 5 years, and I was maybe working in theater and even designing, but it was sort of plateauing, and I felt like I needed something else. So what I always say when I'm asked this question is, it's an extremely personal choice. I wanted to step out of my life. I wanted to not be thinking about anything. I wanted to actually go someplace where someone told me what to do. And most of what they told me to do was do, create, figure out theater. And that's why I went to grad school. I really wanted to step out of my life and just concentrate on this one thing. I didn't want to think about the next job I was going to get or how rent would work that week. I wanted to go someplace where all that was sort of taken care of, or at least didn't use a lot of my brain. And all of my brain was sort of following these, whatever the tasks are, to sort of learn about and create theater. So for me, it was great. I have to admit, by the third year, I was a grumpy old man and I was really done, but I was super, super glad that I went, and felt really good leaving, like really great, like couldn't ran out faster. The thing that I feel like I observed when I went to grad school is I think about contemporaries of mine, and there are people who chose to go to grad school, and there are people who kind of kept going, and they may have moved on to other things. They started assisting people on Broadway. They were actually making pretty good coin doing that, so they could kind of get their life in order, allowed them the freedom to maybe move on to some other projects. So I felt like when I got out of grad school, and my friends who sort of did that route didn't go to grad school, but had found other avenues, other ways, we were both in the same place. We were both sort of out there looking for similar things, working with similar people, working on projects at a similar level. So I don't think there's a perk to one or the other. I think it's an extremely personal choice. The only thing I would say about grad school is I don't think it should happen right after undergraduate school. I think you have to go live your life, whatever that is. And if that's in theater, cool. And then decide like, yeah, now I'm ready, I should go do that, or not. But I feel like it's a personal choice, and I don't think you can make it until you're there.
Yeah, definitely agree on the taking time off in between. And yeah, I think it could totally go either way. I think if you're going to grad school, you should know why you're going to grad school. Rather than just, and that can be, I want to teach someday and I need a master's degree to do that, and that's fine. But I think knowing why you want to go will also help you figure out what the right school is, because there's none of them are perfect, but there are especially like more and more every day, it feels like. And I got a BFA and then an MFA. I wanted someone to kick my ass. Basically, my BFA was great. I learned a lot of great things, like about the business, which is super valuable. And I knew about what to deduct on my taxes, which was great. And then like got a lot of kind of real life design experience during that program, but there was like some, and like the craft stuff I kind of had, but then there was like a lot of big picture stuff that I felt like I was missing. And it was like really nice. Like I didn't get a lot of good critique. And then I was designing at small theaters, tiny theaters in like San Francisco, where everyone was just excited that they could see people and that I existed, which was so nice. But I was like, I know this could be better. Like I see work that is better, and I don't know how to get outside of my own box. So I was like, I just need someone to help me with that. Yeah, but again, I think you can, if you fall in with a great mentor, or you fall in with maybe like some really rigorous collaborators, I think you can gain a lot of those things just in life. But if you find yourself there, and I was like, I am not getting that. And so here I was. Yeah.
It's hard for me to speak to this because it took me 17 years to get my bachelor's, and my family likes to joke that I have a PhD in undergrad. So I'm not necessarily the right person to talk, but I'm actually probably the exact person to talk because, it takes all types. And again, see previous comment regarding needle in a haystack. That doesn't mean that for those 17 years I wasn't learning at every job I had, in every discipline I have. Sorry, there's a 16-year-old upstairs. sh- uh, and there was no coursework in projection design, so I kind of mashed it together at NYU as an undergrad in the grad design department. But I also took classes in set design and acting and women in the media at UMass Boston while I was out working at an architect firm. Everything I took a lot of classes in semiotics because it interested me, you know, looking at imagery. Did a lot of photography on my own, so that when I did finally put it all together, all of that had been building to that moment. So I think you can't discount what you learn outside, and also working at real jobs in the real world. You know, I worked at MIT as a secretary. I worked in an antique store. I learned how to earn a living, and I learned how to run a small business, so that then flash ahead when I figured out what I wanted to do with my life, I kind of learned from doing how to run a small business and how to, and also I never worried about being unemployed because I always knew I would work at Starbucks. Because I mean, to this day, I'm 55 years old, and if work gets slow, I have no problem heading down to the Starbucks and getting a job because I know I can work, and that helps, because you always feel like if you feel like that's a failure, then it's gonna be harder for you, because you know, you just need to look at work as something you enjoy doing and that you can earn a living at, and anything beyond that is frosting. As far as a graduate degree, there was no graduate degree. My journey has been more one of really being a protege to Wendell, and then once I went off on my own, immediately being an instructor myself, because you don't. I tend to hire people. Certainly in the early days, no, you weren't hiring. I wasn't hiring assistant projection designers; they didn't exist. I was hiring Photoshop artists and photographers, but my favorite assistants were lighting designers, because I brought them over to the dark side because they were really good at keeping paperwork. They were really well organized, and not a lot of Photoshop artists or photographers are very good at keeping paperwork. They really actually stink at it. So that was like my secret weapon at a certain point, about 10 years into my career, where I was like, aha. And so to me, my career has been pretty much, the underpinnings of my career have always been the amazing people that I've brought on board. And I always say, I can teach you how to use the tools. I can teach you paperwork. I can teach you those things. I'm looking for people that are going to be pleasant to be with for 10 out of 12. So that's been my journey as far as education. I also learned from them, because I tend to be a collaborator, that everybody brings something to the table on my team. I don't expect, it's not a dictatorship. It's a dictatorship in those moments where a decision needs to be made, and it is my name on it and it is my ass on the line. But at the same time, I don't want them to just be machines. I want them to contribute. So that's kind of the learning experience that I've been through. Having said that, now at this point, I'm actually putting together curriculum and looking at teaching in the next months and years, because it feels as though more and more schools are looking for projection design programs. But I completely agree with Masha and Matt that it's a completely personal choice. I've had colleagues who have gone to graduate school and it was exactly what they needed. I've had them, and it was a way to avoid not knowing what you wanted to do next, but then they got inspired by being in grad school. So it really is it's not necessary. It's even not necessary. It just makes life easier if you want to teach. But it really is a personal decision. Are you going to get something out of it and walk away a stronger designer? I think that's the biggest choice you need to make.
All really great points. And knowing that there are a lot of different paths to get to this career. And once you get there, though, do you have any tips and tricks or any comments on having a work-life balance? It's a very tricky industry. And, you know, as you mentioned, that if something's lacking, maybe you can go see some family or handle it that way. but even on like a day-to-day basis or just an overhaul, how do you guys handle that? Anyone can start.
Can I start this one?
Yeah,
Sorry,
go
Matt.
for it. And then I think Masha should, so we can continue
Absolutely.
changing the cycle.
Well, Masha, you take it. I'll sit on my answer. No. All right. I was just at USITT, so I was just at a conference, and what was really exciting, well, it was exciting to be in a conference with other humans in person. That was pretty exciting, and actually to come home and not get COVID. But there was a panel that was talking about lighting design, and what it was encouraging, and the room was packed because they were looking at how do you look beyond theater for lighting design. And they had this like collage of places that you can exercise your lighting design chops. And there were people on the panel who did like the Super Bowl, the Super Bowl halftime show. One guy who does, he does video and lighting for corporate lobbies and loves it. It fits his personality. I think the reality is the TV lighting, there's always a shortage of people who light for TV. Same thing with projections. You can design the kiosks in the lobby. You can design virtual reality. I think that one thing people need to really understand is not to think so narrowly, like it's got to be theater or it's nothing else. There's so many other ways, architectural lighting, architectural projections, that I found really exciting, was young people being reminded, hey, this is important, that you not think of it in such a small way. And I forget the second half of the question.
Just in overall, like a work-life balance and how you can maintain that throughout your career.
Sorry. It's really personal choice. I mean, it runs the gamut. It's all doable. It's just, different levels of pain. But, everybody needs to make their own choices. You might decide that you don't want to have a life partner, or you don't want to have children, and that's perfectly legit. I personally have put as much import on my private life as my professional life, partly just because that was my journey and that's what happened and that was what was important to me. It's not easy. It's definitely not easy. It certainly wasn't easy traveling to Europe with my 9-month-old and her taking her first steps on an airplane on the tarmac, and not feeling like I was an abusive mother. But at the same time, that's what our life path was as a family. I think it's always checking in with yourself what your priorities are. And it's perfectly legitimate priority to say, you know what? I want to have the life of an artist and I wanted that to be my priority. I don't necessarily want to have kids and I want to travel the world. All of it is perfectly legitimate. It's just about being in the moment and trying to do the best you can with whatever you're pursuing.
Yeah. Let's see. Tips or tricks. I find it's great to have a community of your fellow designers to bounce ideas off of and chat with and whatnot. And it's always like a little funny because you're also in competition with each other a lot of the time. And I think trying to move past that and have authentic relationships with your peers for me has been great. And I think that started, Matt, I'm sure this was probably true for you too, maybe, but in grad school, we had lighting seminar where all of the lighting designers in all 3 years of school would go through their processes and everyone was always like, and then you graduate, you don't have a lighting seminar anymore. How do you even figure anything out? Make your own lighting seminar, right? So, and in a very casual way of just I saw your show. What was that fixture that you used? I've never seen that, just keeping that community, the community resources going in a way. In terms of work-life balance, having some friends that don't do theater is really great. Whether that's also maybe your life partner, not in my case, but can be helpful. I don't know that there's like a cookie cutter approach to work-life balance. And I'm generally very excited that we're looking at our work-life balance in the industry and what our hours are and how crazy it is, and figuring out how you could potentially have a family or a life while still being a designer. I support all of that. And then every once in a while, you're going to do a show where you're like, I want to be with these people 24 hours a day. I don't care if it's in 10 out of 12. I don't care how much I'm getting paid. I just like, I want to be in here, and then I want to go to the bar with them. And like, we're all obsessed with the same thing right now. That's not sustainable for a career or for your whole life, but every once in a while that happens, and that's also okay, I think. Yeah, but I'm a social person, and so for me, it's like if I come back from a show, kind of I need things that tether me, because as designers, we travel all the time, and we get really good at making families in the course of like a week, and then never seeing each other again for another 9 months, and then maybe seeing each other on another tech, which is all great, but also making sure that you have some more tethered relationships to maybe it's some of those same collaborators, but that like you come back from a tech and I'm like, great, come over for dinner so that I can see you and feel like I do live in this city and this is my home and I do have a community and I'm not just a molecule floating in an airplane in space.
Definitely more than that.
I would say that probably the important thing to know is that you aren't your job. That I think just saying you're a lighting designer, like we all hate that question, what do you do? You know, that isn't the answer or the only answer. Really find out what all the things are. Are you a baton twirler? Do you do a lot of volunteer work? Do you have a jug band? You know, there's so much more to you, and all of that stuff is why you've been asked into the room to design something, not just because you're a lighting designer, because there's all this life experience and all this other passions and whatever that you like. You really need to make those a part of you. And sort of to Masha's point about friends that aren't in theater, find that community that isn't the ones who know what you do, and therefore you have to find something else to talk about. Like, find that other group, whatever it is. I think that's super important. Again, it's another resource. You're supposed to bring to the room not your knowledge of Vectorworks, but what you can bring to whatever this project is. That could be anything. That could be something you heard or learned or whatever. And then the work-life balance thing. I would say that there is no formula, and then if it's what you want, you should just do it. I would, I think about my wife and I when we knew we wanted children. I worked in theater. She's a playwright. She was working at a school at the time. There was no right time or practical time, and there never will be. And you should just do it. And then how things happened in terms of when I went out of town or she went out of town, I cannot tell you. There was no plan. It was just day to day. So if it's children, for instance, you wake up and you have children. And so it's just another part of your day. It's a I get dressed in the morning. Oh, and I have this kid. I've got to, so really don't think about these things as obstacles. Think of them as the next thing you want to do, because they're all going to inform who you are. These experiences are just going to make you better at why people brought you into the room to do something anyways. So don't really ruminate or think about a plan. Don't come with a plan, because I think you'll throw it out right away. Just, if it's what you want, just do it. And it's there's a lot of things to consider, but don't pause just because work might suffer. Work is not the only thing.
Just to augment something Matt just said about, yes, there's no good time to have a child. You just have a child. But the best advice I got about parenting when I was, 12 months pregnant was that kids like structure, and that's crap. Everybody likes structure. Structure makes life easy. But structure can be, good morning, mommy's in Atlanta working on a museum right now. Daddy's, at a load-in at the Metropolitan Opera, but so and so is here that we've already made it clear to you that this person taking care, and as a parent, like, okay, then if you say you're picking them up at 5 o'clock, pick them up at 5 o'clock, like move heaven and earth, like tell everybody to go away. That it's about setting expectations for that child. And like Matt said, it just becomes part of it doesn't mean that, it means that in a life like ours, structure can be, there is no structure. The structure is, I show up when I say I'm going to show up. It doesn't mean mommy's never coming back from Atlanta because mommy shows up after she's done with Atlanta. It's just a way of not panicking and instead being clear about the routine. The routine is, it's constantly in flux.
Awesome. It was really inspiring to hear all of these, especially because those are definitely things that I'm afraid of when I graduate, in the world of like how to do this, but also have a life, but also not go insane and still want to do this in the future, still kind of thing. So yeah, and then all of those things of how to be an adult, which transitions into our next of how to be an adult 101. Are you a member of a union? We talked about this in like my senior seminar class of like unions and the benefits of unions and like what like how they could be helpful, or like when you should go in and join a union and stuff like that. So are you a member? What are the benefits? How have they helped you? X, Y, and Z. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll hop into this one. I'm a member. I think technically I'm a member of 2 unions. Surprise. Um, adjunct teaching in some places lands you in an auto worker union. The things you learn. Much more powerful union than the designer union. Yeah, I'm in USA 29, which is a funny union. It's part of IATSE, but we are countrywide. We contain live performance people and film people and scenic painters that span both and started the whole thing. It's very confusing. It's constantly going through identity crises in some way or another, it feels like. But I joined the union pretty shortly after grad school because they were doing a like sort of a new member drive type thing, which worked out well timing wise for me. It's funny because I feel like my thoughts about the union and participation in said union changed completely during the pandemic. And I think that's true for at least a lot of people I know around my age career-wise, where for the first chunk of their time in the union, it was like a way to get health insurance and contracts and, have some safety. And then, but it sort of existed somewhere far away and wasn't something I thought about too much, and it felt very opaque. And then all of a sudden we had all this spare time to think about how we could all be better. And as freelancers, I mean, I can't speak for everyone, but certainly a lot of us aren't necessarily tied to any particular institution, so I can't go and reform my theater company. But we do have a union, and that union needed some work, I think. I mean, it did amazing things over the years, but we had a big shift in leadership pretty recently. And there's been, I think, more participation, activism within said union. And that's sort of helped, again, I think, forge more communication between designers, which is, I think, what a union is for, so that we can support each other better. Yeah.
I'll go. I'm also a member of USA 29. USA 29 did not represent projection designers for most of my career, so I was kind of doing the Wild West for a long time. But the pandemic and the opportunity during the pandemic to attend monthly meetings made a huge difference, because prior to the pandemic, the monthly meetings took place, on a Monday at a location in Times Square, and you really, that isn't what you do with your dinner break. It isn't what you do with your day off. It was, again, like Masha said, it was this way off thing. The ability now, because it's been approved that we can actually meet via Zoom, because that was a question of during the early part of the pandemic, can we legally meet virtually? And it turns out we can. And so that's made it a lot more people show up, which makes the union stronger. And yes, we had a complete overhaul of the board, the people in positions of strength, and a more diverse group of people representing the union, and a lot of looking at ways we were operating as a union and making corrections for, shaking off the old news, and questioning our decision making. I'm really proud to be a union member now. I think the union really, this was exactly the time we needed a union, and the union stepped up. My family wouldn't have had health insurance throughout the pandemic had it not been for the union. And that's a scary thing, because that's a lot of money. I'm really glad now that I'm getting jobs again and paying back into the union. Again, that's why there's a union. That's where we're supposed to be there for each other. There was a lot of outreach. And I think, personally, I think the union is a great group to be a part of these days, and to have a voice in, because there's a lot of re-examining what a union means, and what I think, particularly for younger generations right now, you're going to have a lot of say in what that's about. And I think governmentally within our country right now, unions are a useful thing. I think we're seeing that, with REI and, Starbucks and all sorts of ways. But it does, we call each other our kin. Where else do you refer to people as in kinship? You sign the paper like that. That's pretty cool. And the idea of being in there for the greater good. So we're only as strong as our weakest link. So, those people who could pay into or had health insurance build up, they were basically subsidizing people who didn't have enough saved up within the union based upon their jobs. That's pretty amazing. And also, it's getting off Broadway. There's a lot more focus on a living wage and how to make our industry less abusive and more something we can afford to work in. So you want to be, in my opinion, you want to be part of that voice.
Yeah, I'm a member of USA 29 and have been for a while. I'm not a terribly active member, but I keep up on what's going on. I joined when I was a young person, basically for the same problems that still exist. I needed health insurance. I mean, it wasn't the only reason, but that was a big reason. I've since moved on to my wife's health insurance, but nonetheless, it was really important at the time. There are a lot of things that, there are a lot of benefits in terms of contracts that have been negotiated already, that provide for you terms already established by the union and certain organizations. So that could be off-Broadway theaters, that could be Lort theaters, that could be Broadway. So there's a framework that's been established. Within that, there is an obligation for who you're working with to pay into your pension and welfare, which puts into your pension and puts into your healthcare, among other things. And that's very important. I think sort of to what they're saying, like things are moving in the right direction. It's a small group, and we are usually the last group that anybody wants to talk to. And therefore we're sometimes like, what's left in the purse is a lot of times where we get left. And that's kind of a shame. The thing I think that's important about the union, and I think actually you have to think about this, when you're working is like, do you feel respected? And I think respect is a big word. It covers a lot of things. It's not just what you're paid. It's, can my assistant who lives in Bushwick get home safely? It's a lot of things. And so understanding that, there's a person there and we have to address the needs of that person. And it's not just us trying to figure out how to get this person to come in here and do this stuff as cheaply and quickly as possible. So I think that the union is a path towards better respect in this industry. And I'm hoping that right now is a good time and that we are really moving in that direction. So I think the union is your friend right now in terms of making it a proper, work-life balance existence. So I'm all.
Matt, you should come join the Respectful Workplace Committee.
All right, I
Em-
got time.
It's
Emily, I think that the union does a lot of the grown-up stuff you're talking about and are nervous about, because things like pension. Pension is, I don't know, some foreign word to somebody in their 20s and 30s. But being on the other side of 50, I'm here to tell you the fact that, going into theater, I never thought, pension was something my dad got. And he worked the same job for 50 years. So, it was a foreign thing. My sister's a teacher. She got a pension. Basically, now as I head very rapidly into my 60s, it is something on the horizon when that day comes when I either cannot work anymore or do not want to work anymore. I will have some form of income. So the grown-up stuff that you talk about that is so far away, and especially as a self-employed person, you can set all that up yourself. I did that for 20 years. It's so much, it's a whole different thing when you're within a structure that's already got that in place and the power of membership. It's not just me, and there was no pension. You can't set aside a pension for yourself. So there's the grown-up stuff that you're talking about.
It's definitely also because like my parents are just like, hey, how's health insurance going to work? Hey, how is your retirement going to work? And like, I guess like that part in my ear of like, oh, I actually don't know how any of this works in this industry. So it's very helpful to hear like all of these things of like how they do help you. And, being a part of it is not just a title of being a part of USA 829 and stuff like that, which is super great. And you basically hit upon the questions that the question that Jane put in the chat of like pensions and the salary and stuff like that. But yeah, cool. Next question, I guess.
All very important points that I really appreciate you guys harping on. And looking at the time, I think we can do 2 more. Yeah, we have about 2 more questions. If this one wants to go a little bit more quickly, that's more than fine. Just out of curiosity, what are your guys' thoughts on technology and how it has impacted the industry and how it kind of continues to?
It's
Okay, I guess I'll
fine.
talk. Oh, you want to go, Masha?
I don't have too much to say about it, but I think it's fine. I think, a tool is a tool. And like with everything else, as long as you know the reason why you're using it, great. I do think as designers, we have some responsibility to learn about new technology, just again, to increase your toolbox. But that can be anything. That's not necessarily like what you see on the trade show floor. It can be, I'm at Home Depot and here's this like weird new light bulb I've never seen before. Let me put that somewhere. So I think they're all tools. I think this space and digital theater, which existed before, but then like is exciting in terms of different ways of thinking about design. And also, again, it really helped kick everyone out of their lanes during the pandemic. All of a sudden, lighting designers were thinking about cameras and set designers were thinking about, I don't know, everybody's bathroom fixtures. There's like everything started changing and who was responsible for what. completely started changing. And I think that shakeup is great. Love that.
Great, thank you. Matt?
Yeah, I would just say there are a lot of things that are allow you to work in a more live way in the theater than they weren't before. Like I feel like a lot of times you have to come in with the ideas in place, and if it didn't work, well, you need to spend several hours kind of rejiggering. And I think of this in particular about working with video. LED's been very helpful in terms of getting just the color I want when I'm trying to do something in conjunction or working against something else on stage. And a lot of times this might be something I'm doing with video. I can remember when in early video work that I used to do, trying to make a 3-color R40 strip light with 3 different colors match certain colors in a particular video we were working with, and we had these points, and I'd go and match them. And every theater we went to had different equipment, so it all looked different. They didn't have the same color, so it was a struggle. Whereas now I feel like that's at your fingertips. However, that is then a trap because in other ways, because you're not making choices before you get to that point or other points. You realize, oh, I have these things. I'll just figure out how to get there. So don't get lazy and go in with the goal and what you really want it to be. If that tool helps you, great. But know that you have to really have an idea when you get there. But I still think the best lighting is one light in the right place. So.
Awesome, great. And Elaine?
I think the important thing to remember at all times is it should be about a good story told well. And I mean, projections in particular, I call it the sports bar, thing that you and I could be having the most incredible conversation. But if I've got a television over my shoulder, even with a commercial on, that person's eyes are going to drift. It's like media is always going to win out over live. It's just something about how our brains work. To that end, I mean, we're entering into a whole new domain within the world of augmented reality, virtual reality. I mean, I'm a huge fan of just our reality. But having said that, I am heading down the road of looking into AR, VR, working on a project with that. And a huge part of it is, rather than poo-poo it, I'd much rather people like me whose front and center is a good story told well, and using your tools. The tools shouldn't drive the story drives your selection of the tools. I'd rather people who have that interest and that concern be using those tools, because I think they're going to use those tools in a way that is more about, some of the first people using media were, oh darn it, this is going to bug me, I apologize. Anyway, they were using video. This is bad. They were using video, but it wasn't about video. I mean, this is the day of VCRs and, little black and white monitors, the Worcester Group. Phew. And what the Worcester Group did so well was they very quickly brought in technology as part of their storytelling, but it wasn't about the technology. I think the Builders Association was kind of the next generation of that. And when they were first starting out, it was about the technology, and their storytelling wasn't that strong. I think they matured into an understanding to mastery of understanding how to bring the technology in. So I think right now for projection designers, there's a lot going on where you can really ask yourself, how do I live with this as part of my storytelling, that it drives the story, that it's not about this tool or this technology, it's about the story that is enhanced by the use of that technology. So that's where I'm at.
Fantastic. And it looks like we have about 5 more minutes, and I think Emily has one last question for you guys, and then we'll start to wrap up.
Yeah, it's one of actually my favorite questions to ask professionals in this industry. And sometimes they hate me for asking this question of like, what is your favorite show that you've ever worked on? Or show, event, XY, yeah, like those kinds of things. But yeah, I always get mixed reviews whenever I ask this question.
I'll
Making
go.
okay.
For the past 10 years or so, I've done a lot of work in opera, but specifically doing new American operas. And my two favorite project, it's like picking your favorite child, you know, they're all your offspring, and some of them are a little more, you know, they're cute babies and they're not cute babies. And I think that, you know, runs the gamut. But I think these two operas I worked on, one was Moby Dick and one was Everest. And what made both of them my favorite was the process, because Moby Dick was brutal, but we got through it and we were very proud of the end result. And Everest was just this moment that the design team, Robert Brill did the set, David Woolard did the costumes. We really didn't have a lighting designer come on until later in the game. And then Leonard Foley was the director, but all disciplines came together and created this story. And I think that was very fulfilling. So for me, overall, the shows where we've all learned to dance together really well, those are my favorite, because I think it shows in the final product.
Thank you, Elaine. Matt or Masha, either?
I can go. I don't know that I can particularly narrow it down. I would say the ones that live most in my head are the ones that have longer processes. And so like there have been a couple shows, one in particular, it's this crazy adaptation of Uncle Vanya that was like 6 translations that we did in like many different spaces, from like black boxes to kind of a fully surround in a gallery type space to under the radar at the public to whatever, in a barn. And that was exciting because working on a project for this was probably over the course of 4 years or so, and working on something for that long and reinventing it for each space really, like, there was like the community of humans that are of course now family, but also just reinventing and refining and like distilling, and like now we put this wallpaper in this configuration and now like this yellow raincoat, you know. And I did it with, you know, the world of the public, and I did it with lights from Home Depot. And so like every version of that was exciting for my brain. And then there's a lot of opera happening around me. And then sort of similarly, but more condensed, I did a new play called Nura that just like personally touched me in just in terms of its subject matter and how we made it. I just identified with it a lot as we were making it, and I think that's not to be discounted. But we also, you know, we did it in DC, we did it in Abu Dhabi, and then we did it at Playwrights Horizons. And each time we did it, like the lighting had to change. And I learned about the play anew. And so again, like that, and then seeing audiences respond over time from all of these different cultures and places. Yeah, like that kind of longitudinal work is exciting.
Very nice. And Matt, last but not least.
Yeah, I actually, I think I heard the question that it was something I hadn't worked on. So anyways, that's the answer I have. I don't have a thing I worked on. I can't think, I'm sure I'm forgetting something, but I'll just go with something that came into my mind first, which was a piece by Robert Lepage called 7 Streams of the River Ota, which I was a long time ago at BAM, and sort of just had a profound effect on me. Very epic. I think it's 8 hours, I don't know, but I can't for a moment think it seemed shorter because it was so engrossing. But epic in that it was long and it was huge at times, but then sometimes there were scenes in which you were watching a guy shave through a bathroom window from the exterior of a building, and you watched that for probably 20 minutes, and somehow it was the most engrossing thing I ever had. So I think it just sort of exploded my mind into all of the things. And so I think finding those things that can be so huge and so small, but still be epic at the same time.
Very cool. And well, that brings us to the end of our panel. I want to thank you guys so much for just, all the points that were made and helping us all to adult even more. And Emily, such a great job co-hosting. It was really, really a pleasure. And now I'm going to pass it on to Jane for our final comments.
Hey, everyone. What a nice panel. I think that what I loved hearing, first of all, how you're all such intellectuals. But I also like that you are all in the same business, but definitely all enjoy each other, challenge each other. And I think that for everyone, all the students listening, it's just a wonderful profession we're all in as designers, because the collaboration and friendship and family, you start at Emily's age, and Emily is just starting to work in some small theaters in New York designing. And, you meet these people, and these guys have all met each other early on in their careers, and you literally become this wonderful family going up through your retirement or whatever. But it's a good life, everyone. And the union makes it an even better life because you get paid well. So I want to thank everyone, and our guests that did join today. If you want to turn your screens on and say hi, feel free for a final wave goodbye. And our next panel is going to be on costume design on March 26th with Isabel Rubio.